Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Pedagogy Podcast, the podcast by teachers for teachers. On today's episode, we will be discussing the importance of cultivating inclusion into classroom environments to create a more affirmative learning environment. A quick definition on inclusion. Inclusion is an educational context means that students feel welcomed, safe, and encouraged to participate in their classroom. We are going to hear from 3 teachers about their experiences with promoting inclusivity into their teaching spaces. Mr. Marco DiPalma addresses discrimination and how to deter it to create a more empowering and friendly classroom. Ms. Madison Steele discusses what bullying is, the different types of bullying, and how to minimize these instances of negativity to promote inclusivity. Finally, Ms. Liz Yelland examines the importance of showing care to students and how to do so. So let's hop right in. First, we will be hearing from Ms. Madison Steele about bullying.
My name is Ms. Steele and I will be discussing the topic of bullying. So first, the main types of bullying I'll be highlighting is general bullying, which is repetitive behavior intended to cause harm, provide unwanted negative actions, and show an imbalance of power or strength between the bully and the victim, as well as cyberbullying, which is being cruel to others by sending or posting harmful material or engaging in other forms of social aggression using the internet or other digital technologies. And this type of bullying is pretty common amongst this generation because of all the social media platforms out there. So now we all know bullying can definitely affect classroom inclusivity, but what's the biggest effect in this? So bullying makes children feel like they don't belong because they often feel alone in what they're going through, and because of the constant bullying from a peer or peers, this can also prevent them from participating in a classroom setting and even reject learning altogether. It has also been found that lack of belonging is actually toxic to the nervous system of a developing child because it not only affects our limbic system, which is the brain's responsible part for our emotional functioning, but our prefrontal cortex as well. And this is the brain's reasoning center. So it drives our ethical and moral behavior and contributes to our social performance. So without belonging, our ability to control our impulses and join in with others can be severely impaired. So most children fail in school not because they lack the necessary cognitive skills, but because they feel detached and isolated from others in the educational process. So when children feel rejected by others, they either internalize the rejection and learn to really hate themselves, or they externalize the rejection and lash out on others. So now the most important aspect of this topic is how do we as educators help prevent this or become aware of this issue if we don't witness it or no one speaks up? So in my grade 1 and 2 classrooms, students have peace journals where they have the free willpower to write or draw however they're feeling and what's going on in their life. And it's clear to students that I will be the only one viewing these journals. And over the years, I have found out about bullying incidents because of these journals, because often victims or bullies and bystanders, they're too afraid to speak up. So these journals give them the opportunity to communicate. And I've also found doing daily check-ins with students is extremely beneficial, as it's also been found by research to increase school and class empathy and attachment. So another approach to help fix this bullying incident is the identification, management, and prevention model. So identification is looking for the attributes, such as if it's a power imbalance, or the type of bullying, and student awareness, like identifying the roles, and then as educators being able to recognize the impact on learning. And then management is creating a classroom environment where students are willingly not afraid to report cyberbullying and not afraid to speak up, and making sure all students are aware of that. And finally, prevention is the responsibility of educators to design classroom activities that align with strategies for identifying, managing, and reporting cyberbullying, which we have already discussed. So thank you.
So from my experience as a former teacher, I'd like to shed light on the topic of discrimination and how empowering students is a way to remove it. First, I'd like to clarify the difference between prejudice and discrimination. Prejudice is a prejudgment, is an opinion, which is made in advance and is not based on evidence. It is a negative attitude towards members of a group. Like a stereotype, it is a baseless generalization. Discrimination, on the other hand, is the behavior resulting from prejudice, which grants or denies individuals or groups opportunities and rewards based on characteristics such as ethnicity, sex, class, religion, and language. In any form, discrimination reflects a power difference. To remove discrimination, educational programs must be founded on a philosophy of education linked to equity, empowerment, and positive self-concept. The definition of equity means fairness and implies justice. From the perspective of educators, it is the passion to continually develop the skills to teach all students so that they are empowered to make life choices that are transformative in both their individual and social possibilities. As stated earlier, one of the ways to combat discrimination is through empowerment. Empowering education means creating conditions that allow for the transformation of students' potential personal power. It involves a pivotal role for the teacher in facilitating and creating an interdependent relationship with students. This type of education places power with both the teacher and the students, with classrooms acting like communities. Now let's turn to the article by Kirk et al., which can be found at the SFU library. It's called The Empowering Schools Project, Identifying the Classroom and School Characteristics that Lead to Student Empowerment. This article talks about the student empowerment model. This model demonstrates the process by which student empowerment affected by individual characteristics, such as personality, learning disabilities, combined with ecological contexts, like family and their neighborhood, and the characteristics of empowering classrooms and schools, and how it leads to empowered outcomes. We will focus on the characteristics of empowering classrooms. This model identified 5 empowering characteristics on the classroom setting. This included teachers believing in the ability of students to be successful, a positive sense of community generated among classmates, and classroom practices that were engaging. Each of these characteristics help students develop the motivation and self-determination to succeed. 2 additional characteristics, equitable student-teacher roles and shared decision-making, were identified that added to these and are considered the important role of power in the classroom. Let's elaborate on equitable student-teacher roles and shared decision-making. The degree of equity in the relationship between teachers and students was identified as a key characteristic related to student empowerment. An equitable relationship between student and teacher involves bidirectional listening and mutual respect, leading to shared power for decision-making. Classrooms where teachers allow the students to share in the choices has led to more students making positive choices while also being engaged by subject matter. I hope this model and discussion on discrimination has shed light on ways for prospective teachers to make their classrooms safer for students and inspire positive learning.
Hi everybody, my name is Mrs. Yelland and I'm going to discuss how care and respect can promote inclusivity in a classroom environment. I will also describe the benefits of using a caring teaching approach, describe some techniques that cultivate care, and share my experiences implementing those strategies into my classroom. So you may be thinking, what is care? Well, care involves both the showing of care and the feeling of being cared for. Showing care involves showing respect to others, having a strong regard or consideration for them. Now, you may be asking, how does care even relate to inclusion? Well, this is where the feeling of being cared for comes in. Once someone begins to feel cared for, they'll start to feel happy, welcomed, invited, and included. This means that when teachers show care to their students, it can help them to feel a sense of secureness and inclusion in the classroom. Now, how can teachers show care to their students in order to cultivate inclusion? I'm going to share 2 techniques that I have used in my classrooms, the tribal classroom approach and care ethics. The tribal classroom approach describes a classroom with a strong sense of community. That's where the word tribal comes in. This model of secure attachment highlights how a teacher's support towards students can help them to feel part of the classroom tribe, where they feel safe, included, and cared for. The first step towards creating a tribal classroom involves establishing trust. In one of my classes, I developed this trust through classroom activities that involve working together. Specifically, I used group problem-solving activities where students had to come together as one to complete an assignment. This shows the students that they can feel safe working together and trust one another. The next step towards creating a tribal classroom involves minimizing student stress, anxiety, and fear. Some things that I've done in my classroom to minimize these feelings is to use a warm tone of voice, warm and open body language, smile and have happy facial expressions, and use positive statements. These displays of kindness and care can help students to feel more comfortable and invited into the classroom environment. Now, moving to the care ethics perspective, it is a moral philosophy which holds care as a basic ethical principle. It highlights there is the carer and the cared for. I like to think of care ethics as the notion of treating others how you would like to be treated, since it is regarded as a relational process of feeling good when you treat others good, and others feeling good and being inspired to further treat others good. I've come to realize that many teachers are weary to show care to their students because they believe it'll undermine their authority. Rather, when teachers approach education with care as the basis, students will come to respect those teachers more so than an authoritative and controlling teacher. The main way to incorporate care ethics into a classroom is to display receptive listening to students. This involves actively being available to students, receiving their messages, and responding accordingly. When I started my teaching career, I was not a receptive listener, and this caused my relationships with students to be weak since I was not emotionally available to them. But when I made my students' needs my priority and dedicated the time to receptively listen to them, the classroom environment became much more of a safe space. Now, I want to stress that being a teacher involves modeling and showing positive behaviors to students, so once they start to recognize the care and inclusion that they are experiencing, they will start to reciprocate it. The tribal classroom and care ethics techniques that I have described allow teachers to effectively display care to students in a way that will help to cultivate inclusivity. I hope these strategies will help teachers to interact with students with compassion and care and will help to create a more inclusive classroom.
So we have heard from 3 inspiring teachers about cultivating inclusion into classroom environments and discussed topics of bullying, discrimination, and care, which all 3 were very important factors when adding inclusion in a classroom. As we have heard, inclusion is an absolutely necessary aspect that teachers need to focus on, as there are many negative effects when inclusion is not considered or made aware of in a classroom. The school is an environment where individuals spend lots of their time, and it is very important for every student to feel included, safe, and cared for in their class. I'd like to thank Ms. Steele and Ms. Yelland for being on our podcast. Hope to have you back again in the future. Tune in next week for another exciting episode.